Hi friends, my name is Benjamin, and today I want to tell you another heartbreaking story. Kristin Rossum, born on October 25, 1975 in Tennessee, USA, grew up in California and Virginia, as her family frequently moved due to her father's job. She had two siblings, and during her early teens, Kristin attended an all-girls boarding school where she started engaging in behaviors like drinking beer and smoking cigarettes. By the age of 17, in 1992, Kristin was already using methamphetamine. In 1994, she enrolled in a university, attempting to break free from prohibited substances use. However, after experiencing a relapse, she dropped out and relocated to San Diego. The course of her life changed in 1995 when she met Gregory de Villers. It appeared that she had overcome her struggles with prohibited substances and was on the path to starting a family. Kristin and Gregory married in 1999 after she graduated with honors from San Diego State University in 1998. She pursued a career as a toxicologist, working in the city's medical examiner's office. Despite early challenges, it seemed that Kristin had successfully turned her life around and was enjoying a positive trajectory. However, not everything ends with a happy ending. On the 6th day of November in the year 2000, which happened to be a Monday, a 25-year-old woman named Kristin Rossum made a distress call to 911 at 9:22 p.m. from her residence in San Diego, California, situated in the United States. In her call, she reported that her 26-year-old husband, Gregory de Villers, was not breathing and had allegedly taken his own life. The emergency dispatcher advised Kristin to perform CPR, but unfortunately, despite her efforts and the subsequent arrival of paramedics and police, Gregory was pronounced dead. Kristin and Gregory had been married for a relatively short period of 17 months. According to Kristin's account to the police on that evening, Gregory appeared somewhat drowsy, which she attributed to the effects of cold medication. Kristin further explained that she took a bath, and upon exiting, she discovered Gregory lying on the bed without signs of breathing. The police found the scene puzzling, as Gregory was located on the bedroom floor amidst scattered rose petals. A wedding photo was near his pillow, and crumpled diary pages belonging to Kristin were strewn on the floor. Kristin claimed that she moved Gregory to the floor in order to perform CPR. The police drew a comparison to a scene from the movie American Beauty due to the peculiar aspects of the situation. Initially, when the paramedics first arrived, Kristin informed them that her husband Gregory had not taken any drugs. However, later on, she changed her statement and mentioned that he might have ingested oxycodone. Upon their arrival at the hospital, Kristin conveyed to a nurse her suspicion that Gregory could have overdosed on oxycodone. The police, in their investigation, explored the possibility that Gregory's death might have resulted from an accidental overdose involving a combination of cold medicines and oxycodone. In their discussions with Kristin, they learned that Gregory was distressed, indicating that their marriage seemed to be on the rocks. This led Kristin to initially suggest to the police that he had taken his own life, an avenue of inquiry they also pursued. According to Kristin's account, the scattered rose petals surrounding Gregory's body were remnants from a bouquet he had gifted her for her birthday on October 25th. She believed that the use of these petals symbolized the end of their marriage, with one surviving rose being the source. Gregory's family, as well as others on the night his body was discovered, expressed skepticism about the notion of suicide. On November 8th, a significant turn in the investigation occurred when one of Kristin's co-workers, Russ Lowe, contacted the police. He revealed that Kristin was engaged in an extramarital affair with her manager, altering the trajectory of the police inquiry. Gregory first crossed paths in 1995, ultimately tying the knot in 1999. Kristin, initially struggling with methamphetamine abuse, turned her life around with Gregory's support and graduated with top honors in biochemistry. She secured a position as a toxicologist at the San Diego County Office of the Medical Examiner, OME, in March 2000. Meanwhile, Gregory pursued a career in the biotech industry. Shortly after Kristin commenced her employment at the OME, Michael Robertson, an Australian citizen, assumed the role of forensic laboratory manager, replacing Russ Lowe. Russ, who had been serving as the acting laboratory manager, had a lengthy tenure at the OME. The decision to appoint Michael instead of Russ to the permanent position generated tension within the laboratory environment. The atmosphere became even more strained when it became known among employees that Kristin and Michael, both of whom were married, were engaged in an extramarital affair. Concerns arose among some employees about the possibility of preferential treatment for Kristin. In October 2000, a few months after these revelations, Kristin resumed using methamphetamine. Police investigations revealed that on November 2, 2000, just 4 days prior to Gregory's discovery dead, he confronted Kristin about her prohibited substances use and his suspicion of her affair. Gregory insisted that she resign from the OME and threatened to expose her prohibited substances use and the affair to her employer if she refused. Following Gregory's death, an autopsy was conducted, including toxicology tests. Dr. Blackburn, the medical examiner, determined that Gregory died from acute fentanyl intoxication. Toxicology results indicated extremely elevated levels of fentanyl, along with smaller amounts of clonazepam and trace levels of oxycodone in Gregory's autopsy specimens. When questioned about the source of the fentanyl, Kristin claimed ignorance. However, the police were aware that, due to her role as a toxicologist, Kristin had access to fentanyl. The police theorized that Kristin may have secretly administered the fentanyl to Gregory, leading to his poisoning. They constructed a case based on the medical and toxicological evidence. Subsequently, Kristin was charged with first-degree murder, to which she pleaded not guilty. During the trial, Kristin's parents, Ralph Rossum and Claremont McKenna, went to great lengths to secure her $1.25 million bail by mortgaging their home. However, this financial commitment left them unable to afford a private attorney. Consequently, the court appointed a public defender to represent Kristin. The prosecution asserted that Kristin murdered Gregory because he threatened to expose her prohibited substances use and affair with Michael Robertson to her employer. According to the prosecution, Kristin allegedly poisoned Gregory with fentanyl, a potent synthetic opiate that is 80 times stronger than morphine. They suggested that she may have initially attempted to harm him with clonazepam, but when that failed, she resorted to using fentanyl. The prosecution further claimed that Kristin staged the bedroom to simulate a suicide, tearing pages from her diary and strategically placing petals and a wedding photo around Gregory's body. The court learned that Kristin, holding a degree in biochemistry, allegedly utilized her knowledge of prohibited substances and chemistry to carry out the poisoning. The prosecution argued that Kristin aimed to persuade her colleagues at the medical examiner's office, where she worked, that Gregory's death was a suicide. However, due to a conflict of interest, the case was transferred to another laboratory to conduct the toxicology tests, as it was normally the responsibility of the medical examiner's office to determine the cause of death in unusual cases. The prosecution described Kristin's activities on the 6th of November to the jury. In the morning, she informed Gregory's employer about his absence and then went to work. Her co-workers stated that an hour after arriving at work around 9 a.m., she was observed crying in Michael's office. The apartment complex manager, where Kristin and Gregory resided, testified that she returned to her apartment at 12:10 p.m., seen rushing inside. Later, at 12:41 p.m., she visited a local grocery store and bought a few items. In the hours leading up to Gregory's demise, she made multiple calls to Michael. Rose petals were discovered around Gregory's body, with Kristin attributing them to the lone surviving rose from the bouquet he gave her for her birthday. However, the police revealed a receipt indicating that Kristin purchased a single rose on the same day Gregory passed away. The court learned about the circumstances of Gregory's death and the elevated levels of fentanyl detected in the tested samples. Dr. Brian Blackburn, the medical examiner for San Diego County, who conducted Gregory's autopsy, provided testimony stating that Gregory had already been deceased for at least an hour before the paramedics arrived. Dr. Blackburn informed the court that Gregory exhibited early bronchopneumonia, a condition arising when normal breathing processes fail to eliminate accumulated secretions in the lungs due to unconsciousness or shallow breathing. Furthermore, Dr. Blackburn disclosed that Gregory's bladder contained a significant amount of urine. This condition would have been uncomfortable for Gregory if he were conscious. As a result, Dr. Blackburn concluded that Gregory had experienced inadequate breathing for approximately 6 to 12 hours leading up to his demise. During Dr. Blackburn's testimony, he clarified that the amount of clonazepam discovered in Gregory's blood was not at the level of an overdose and deemed non-fatal by medical standards. The court was informed that the presence of fentanyl, especially in such elevated levels, was uncommon, and the Office of the Medical Examiner typically did not include it in routine tests. However, due to a conflict of interest, the samples were sent to Pacific Toxicology, and they conducted specific tests for fentanyl. In support of the prosecution, Dr. Theodore Stanley provided testimony. Dr. Stanley explained that fentanyl is a potent and rapid-acting pain reliever, emphasizing a serious side effect associated with it, the potential to induce respiratory failure, causing a person to stop breathing. Dr. Stanley testified that the speed with which fentanyl takes effect depends on the manner in which it is administered. The peak effect occurs about 16 hours after administration of a transdermal patch, 20 to 30 minutes after oral consumption, 15 to 20 minutes after intramuscular injection, and 5 minutes after intravenous injection. Dr. Stanley informed the court that fentanyl is typically not administered orally because the liver destroys approximately 65% of it, allowing only 35% to enter the bloodstream. However, when questioned about how fentanyl entered Gregory's body, neither Dr. Blackburn nor Dr. Stanley could offer a definitive opinion. Dr. Stanley suggested that the varying concentration levels in Gregory's system, combined with evidence of him being unconscious and breathing shallowly for an extended period before his death, indicated that fentanyl might have been administered to him multiple times. The prosecution, while unable to definitively explain how Kristin poisoned Gregory, presented indications that she may have applied fentanyl patches to his arm while he slept. The court was made aware that following Gregory's death and the discovery of fentanyl use, the Office of the Medical Examiner conducted an audit of its impounded drugs and drug standards. This audit revealed the disappearance of 15 fentanyl patches and 10 milligrams of fentanyl standard. Furthermore, the audit disclosed that Kristin had logged in the fentanyl standard and had been involved in each of the 3 cases where the missing fentanyl patches had been impounded. The Office of the Medical Examiner also discovered that quantities of methamphetamine, clonazepam, and OxyContin, a time-released form of oxycodone, were unaccounted for. It was the defense's case that Kristin was innocent. They conceded that fentanyl caused Gregory's death, but it was the defense's case that he committed suicide because he was despondent over his marital problems. During the trial, Kristin testified in her own defense. She informed the court that when she woke up on the morning of November 6th, Gregory appeared disoriented. At 7:42 a.m., she left a message with his employer, notifying them of his illness and absence from work. Kristin stated that she went to work but returned home to check on Gregory later. They had lunch together after midday. According to Kristin's testimony, she inquired about Gregory's earlier state, and he admitted to taking some of her oxycodone and clonazepam. After lunch, he went back to bed, and she returned to work. Leaving work at 2:30 p.m., she went back to the apartment, met with Michael, and then returned to the apartment around 5 p.m. She left again at 6:30 p.m. for errands. Kristin claimed to have returned at 8 p.m. and took a bath. Kristin testified that she entered the bath, believing Gregory was asleep, only realizing he wasn't breathing upon getting out. It was at that point she called 911. During cross-examination, the prosecutor criticized Kristin's account as bizarre. She admitted to previous lies, including ones about her prohibited substances use. The prosecutor emphasized that fentanyl, being challenging to detect, was an ideal poison, a fact Kristin, familiar with such substances due to her job, was well aware of. Despite Dr. Blackbourne's testimony stating that the clonazepam levels in Gregory's blood were not fatal, the defense argued that the combination of oxycodone and clonazepam could have a synergistic effect, making them more potent. However, this explanation did not address the mystery of how fentanyl was consumed and why such high levels were present. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristin guilty of first-degree murder and murder by special circumstances due to the use of poison. She was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kristin appealed her conviction, and during the appeals court proceedings, it was revealed that errors were made by her own defense team. Her lawyers admitted that while they acknowledged fentanyl as the cause of death, they neglected to request testing for fentanyl metabolites in the autopsy samples. This test could have helped establish whether Gregory had actually ingested fentanyl or if the presence of fentanyl in the samples was a result of laboratory contamination after his death. If the fentanyl was exclusively found in the samples and had never been in Gregory's body, it would have contradicted the prosecution's argument that fentanyl caused his death. The question arises: how could fentanyl be present only in the samples, and would there be any potential for laboratory contamination if the office of the medical examiner sent the samples to a different laboratory for testing? The appeals court learned that there was a break in the chain of evidence concerning the samples. The appeals court learned that the samples, designated as specimens extracted from Gregory's body, were placed in an unsealed cardboard box. The intended procedure was for immediate transportation to the sheriff's office for subsequent transfer to an external laboratory. However, due to the unavailability of the designated recipient at the sheriff's office, the box containing the samples was retained within the office of the medical examiner. Approximately 36 hours later, it was eventually transported to the sheriff's crime lab. The central argument presented to the appeals court was that during this time frame, when the samples were held in the OME, anyone with a key to the building had potential access to them. This opened up the possibility that fentanyl could have been introduced to the samples posthumously, casting doubt on the theory that fentanyl caused Gregory's death. Kristin contended that there might have been a motive to contaminate the samples and frame her for murder, pointing to the personal relationships and tensions among the OME employees. In support of this argument, Kristin highlighted an incident on November 8, 2000, where Michael, one of the individuals connected to the OME, reportedly mentioned to a toxicologist at the OME that he had examined a sample of Gregory's stomach contents. The three-judge panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals determined that Kristin's trial lawyers made a mistake by not challenging the prosecution's assertion that her husband died from a fentanyl overdose. They asserted that her legal team should have conducted tests on the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites instead of conceding to the prosecution's narrative. However, they did not overturn the conviction, but rather sent the case back to federal court for a hearing to assess whether this defense error could have changed the trial's outcome. Nevertheless, following a subsequent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, which emphasized federal court deference to state court decisions in such matters, the appeals court panel opted not to order the hearing in Kristin's case. As a result, her appeal was denied, and she remains in prison. Michael Robertson, referred to as a co-conspirator during Kristin's trial, returned to Australia and established a forensics consultancy services firm. What do you think about this story? Share your opinions in the comments. Thanks for watching and for being with us. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.